Okay, so here's just sort of a quick down and dirty about how all of this works. You've got the Ken Onion Worksharp, and it comes with this grinder attachment that allows you to do all kinds of cool stuff. But basically, I would say this is just a standard sort of American-made inexpensive cleaver, and you want to just mess with something that you don't care about messing up at all. And when it comes to this stuff, you don't want to be sort of scared about it. The concern about these types of belt things is overheating the steel, and then people get upset, like, oh, I'm going to ruin my heat treat or something. But yeah, don't do that. You just pay attention to what you're doing. So you got this thing, you turn it on. So with that, you can go in and you can shape the blade. You put on the coarsest one, and then what you want to do is start working your way down to the finest one. So ultimately, you just go step by step through the different levels of how coarse it is, and then you get down to 5,000, which is just, you're really going to get a mirror edge on it at that point. And then you go over to a leather strop, and then you put polishing compounds on it, and you want 1 strop per compound. So you put this only on the one that's marked for that. And then that's when you really just start turning it into a razor blade. So it comes down to just, you get a feel for it. So this blade itself has a hollow grind, and then on the very tip I'm putting this convex edge, so it just gets real nasty real quick. And then with knife sharpening, you build up a burr when you're doing that. So right on the edge of the blade, there will be this burr from each side that you've been working on, and then you just end up with the strop and the other stuff sort of knocking that burr off. And that's what really, underneath the burr is where the razor edge is. And so I would take something like this, I'd spend a lot of time on it, and then really just get down to the point where polish the whole thing up. I mean, you could get this to a mirror where you could, just do your hair in it or whatever, and then it would be shaving sharp, and I'd, drill these out and do a wrap on it, and then epoxy on the wrap and stuff. And then maybe you could go in and shape it also, because there's grinding attachments on here. You could shape it, you could use files to shape it. You just don't want to mess with the heat treat that's already there, so you just don't want to sit there and go to the point where it's like really heating things up. But once you start putting these polishing compounds on, like this is called a slick stick, so you just take a stick, this is a paint stick, and then you take pieces of leather, and then you glue them on there, and then you can put different polishing compounds on. And so another way to do it is you just take it from that point and you work the edge like that, and you can do it by hand, and that works really well also. And so the nice thing about this is I like to just be able to sit there. It's almost therapeutic to do it this way, but you can go through all the different points, and I would suggest getting the old like antique, or antique cleavers that you would get at like an antique sale or some old axe heads, I would say just get in there and mess with them. You can take this attachment off, and you can put the regular attachment on and then use it sort of as a grinder, like for an axe head. And then you would just take it like this and grind it down, polish it on this side, and then do the other side towards yourself, and you can just kind of see how the angle is going. But really you want to just be able to get that, the convex edge is what's really sharp. So, and then with this, you can adjust the angle, the degrees of what you're working on. So you move this, and it rotates this down. So this is the edge you'd normally be working on. And the way they want you to use it is you go like this, you set up this edge, you set the blade flat on that, and then you come and you draw it across that way. And keeping it flat on this, you set that and you draw it across that way. Once I start getting into it more with the smaller knives, I'll get into here because I want to really just get in and make it super hollow ground and just completely change the geometry. I think we start off sort of conservative and timid, and then we get up to the point where we're not conservative and timid, and we're just going for it. And once you're not sort of afraid of fucking something up, that's when you can really do something well. Because you have to be able to be willing to completely redo it, sort of. So like the cleaver I sent you, I reworked a bunch of it. I mean, it started off as a very good tool to begin with, but you can't be afraid to get in there and with the idea of like, oh, you don't want to be afraid of fucking it up, because if you do that, you won't be able to push it past the point where you really need to almost start over, and that you're using the most extreme grit at first, and you're just polishing and taking away material, and then you're going to give it the edge you want it to have. But all of that takes a lot of practice and time, and then by the end, you want the base layer just like you would be if you're polishing any other piece of metal. You want to get a nice rough coat, even with this, and then go one level back, so you're removing all of that material, removing all the marks at each layer, working yourself back one layer at a time of how coarse the material is, so that you get a really nice, clean, even surface. And if you do that, you'll end up with something that can be mirror polished. Think about something that's mirror polished, and then you're using like a waxing or polishing compound. It makes it so slick and slippery. And like when one of my wakazashis from Japan that's 800 years old touches something, the surface is so smooth and slick from how polished it is, that it just, that really contributes to how much it just opens things up. So anyway, that's sort of my 2 cents. I got a lot more sense on it, but that should be able to get you started. But I've used all of the different stones and everything, and being able to use these types of materials, this is what makers use when they're making the knives. So if you're taking a hard stone and then trying to use that to shape the edge of a knife, it's just not as good as using these materials that bend around the edge, and then you can really, with some practice, come up with something that really works well. So there you go. Those are my thoughts.